As Dean said, my name's David Hardwick. I live at Albury-Wodonga. I'm an agroecologist by trade, so an agroecologist is someone that kind of works in between ecology and agriculture, and I've been in that game for about 20 years. And I do soils training and extension around Australia, working from the wet tropics, so sugarcane work with the barrier reef, right through to dairying in Victoria and Tassie. And Dean asked me to come along today and help with the soils bash we're having with Rebecca. So my job's to warm you up and get you into focus, because that video really doesn't quite get where we need to get. So as nice as it is, we're going to jump in and explore the soil this morning in this first session and really see how soils work. Actually, wherever you are, whether you're in a cool temperate area or whether you're in the wet tropics or a desert, soil, there's key processes in topsoils of how they work. So we're really going to jump in and explore the topsoil and how it works. You guys have all been, most of you have a card. So if you have a yellow card, you are a soil microbe and you don't have any brains at all. All right? So if we ask you a question and you look at us really blankly, we won't be surprised. Those of you with a green card, you guys don't have much more DNA than the yellow card, so I wouldn't be laughing too much. And then there's some blue cards as well. But what we're going to do pretty much in this first session until lunch is really jump in and explore soils. I've brought along a couple of soils because the season's not going with us at the moment, and so I hunted one down. Where was this one? On the way here this morning. It's probably illegal taking this one. But there's a soil that I got from under a tree, so there's no grass growing there. So you can see the kind of pattern of formation that topsoil has resulted in. Depending on management and vegetation, we've ended up with a particular pattern of topsoil. And then just from the park here, I don't know what the name of the council is here, but they've got green grass at the moment, so that's all that matters. I've been able to dig out a bit of topsoil that's under active management with perennial grass. So as we go through this morning session, what we're going to do is explore how different topsoils form and why we get different patterns of soil. But whether it's in a forest, that's a forest soil, or a grassland, or what the Americans would call a prairie soil, under the influence of perennial grasses. So whether it's a grassland soil or a forest soil or anything in between, soils have key processes that go on, really common processes, and that's what we're going to explore. And the way we're going to explore that is you guys are going to become part of this soil for an hour or so. And we're going to jump in and see, because it's hard to sort of make decisions as to what to do, what management should I do, how can I improve the water cycle, the nutrient cycle, if we don't first have those first principles of how soils actually work. Yep. So we're going to jump in, starting with the soil. So what do we know is important in this soil? What are the important parts of this soil I'm holding in my hand now? What's going on here? There's structure. Soil has a kind of structure. Can you explain structure or define it a bit for us?
Or whether it's a fine or it's the particle size.
Particle size is part of structure, but particle size more refers to something called soil texture, the feel of a soil. But no matter what type of texture I have, all soils have a particular structure. So there's a difference between soil structure and soil texture. So texture is that particles in your soil. Is it clay or is it sandy? But soils also have a structure. Yep, and we're going to explore that, how structures form and why structure is important. What else is going on in here, apart from soil structure and soil texture?
Aggregation.
Aggregation. What's that word mean? Who said that? What does it mean?
What does it mean?
Yes.
It means, how to explain aggregation?
Yep.
It means like symbiotic relationship between all the parts of the pores of the soil, the bacteria in the soil,
yep.
and the way that the soil is, the way the soil absorbs nutrients, the way it absorbs carbon, the way it absorbs organic matter. So that basically good soil should look a bit like cottage cheese, really. So that's
okay. Yeah. So to put it in a nutshell, aggregation is a type of soil structure. Okay. It's these, and you've explained it really well, but it's these small sort of lumps or clumps, the solid part of the soil. And in this soil, it's arranged in what you call a cottage cheese type pattern. So those little clumps are called aggregates. And looking over here at the equipment Rebecca's bought, we might be looking at them a bit later in the day. So aggregates are kind of like the building blocks of your soil structure. They're like bricks in the wall. So yeah, we're going to explore how aggregation occurs, but it's a good summary. So we've got structure, so it's actually part of structure. So we've got structure, we've got texture. What else is going on in here that's really important that we manage every day? Yep.
Fibres from
Yep, so we've got root systems. You can see the plant's root system is busy. It's filling that soil up. Yep, and everyone noticed in the forest soil that there was roots in that topsoil. Those of you could see it, yep. So there's plant root systems. What else is going on in here that we're managing as land managers?
It's covered.
It's covered. There's ground cover of various types, yep. How many bacteria am I holding in my hand? Yep. Trillions. Gazillions is the technical term. Gazillions. Yep. Yep. So what about fungal hyphae? How many kilometres of fungal hyphae have I got in my hand?
Well, if it's any good, it would be about 50% fungal.
Yep. How long are their structures? How many kilometres worth of fungal hyphae do you reckon?
Well, if you listen to Waller, it's 25,000 kilometres per cubic metre.
Yep.
I've seen up to 100,000
Yep.
measured up to 100,000 kilometres per cubic.
Yep. What? That's Walter Jenny? Is
Yep.
that who you're talking about? Okay. So there's hundreds, if not thousands of kilometres of fungal hyphae and of roots in here. What else is going on in here? We've got soil bacteria, fungi, anything else that's important? Moisture, soil moisture, bugs or soil organisms. Well, we just looked at the two main microbes, which are bacteria and fungi. Yep. Air flowing through there, that's really important for most things in there. Anything else that's really important for us? Photosynthesis is what's happening that plants do, but what about the soil itself? What else is?
Exudates.
Yep, what's an exudate?
It's the sugar that exudes out through the root hairs to
Yep.
feed the fungi and bacteria.
Yep, so the key thing is that that plant is interacting with that soil. So what the key thing with any topsoil on Earth is that topsoil, a really important part of a topsoil is the plants that are growing in and on it. They form part of the topsoil. In fact, the definition of a topsoil is that area of your soil that's strongly under the influence of? Plants. Thank you. That's a topsoil. Everyone's seen a topsoil. We all know the difference between topsoil and subsoil. So it's the area of your soil strongly under the influence of plants. They give them a lot of alcohol in the form of sugars to get into and to liven things up. So we're going to explore this topsoil by starting with the plant. So who's got the plant card? All right, out you come. I've got a chair for you. You don't have to do much. Bring your card though. You need to bring your card in case you forget it. Have a seat. All right, we've got a plant growing in the soil. What's that key process that all plants on Earth do? What's this key process they do? Photosynthesis. So plants photosynthesize. The rest of it, does anyone remember from the video how many millions of years ago did plants or land plants first evolve? About 500, yeah, 4 to 500 million years ago. The algae, so seaweeds and the families, came out of the water and started to colonise bare mineral earth. That was the start of land plants. So all land plants now photosynthesise. So what are the 4 ingredients that Mr. Plant needs to do the job of photosynthesis? There's 4 things that he needs. And don't say beer. Sunlight, water. He doesn't, but for the direct process, so indirectly yes, but there's 4 ingredients he actually needs for the direct process. So we've got sunlight, water, nutrients and carbon dioxide. They're the 4 main ingredients that go in the pot. Everyone happy with that? Sunlight, water, nutrients and carbon dioxide. So where's this plant getting its water from? Where are these plants getting their water from? Where do they take them up from? The soil through their root system. Where's this plant getting its nutrients from? From the soil, taking it up from the soil. Where's this plant getting its sunlight from? Out of the sun, unless you're in a shipping container growing something illegally. And what's the 4th ingredient that plants needed? Carbon dioxide. So where does this plant get its carbon dioxide from? Out of the atmosphere? No. Plants grab it from the air. So plants they get water and nutrients from the soil, they grab carbon from the air, they're powered by the sun, and they create organic matter. Does everyone see that organic matter is both carbon plus nutrient and water? Does everyone see that's what it is? So all organic matter on Earth, whether it's that green leaf or this bit of stick, is carbon from the air and nutrients from the earth combined together. Yep. So this plant is busy photosynthesizing and it's grabbing carbon out of the air as a key part of that. And the carbon in the air is in what form? Hopefully you've been watching the video. Carbon dioxide. So you're fixing carbon out of the air how much of this air we're breathing that this plant needs to grab, and all of these green trees are grabbing the carbon from, what percentage of the air is carbon dioxide? 0.04. Can someone put that in percentages? 0.04? It's 0.04%. Yeah, so 400 parts per million. So there's bugger all carbon in the air. It's a trace element. Carbon dioxide in the air is a trace gas, like zinc and copper in the soil. It's a trace gas. So despite that, all the plants on Earth are grabbing carbon out of the air. So here you go, sir. Here's Minties. This is carbon for today. And you're photosynthesising. All right. So we've got a plant that's photosynthesising. It's pulling in carbon to create, what does it create with that? What's the red skin doing in there? It's pulling in carbon to create carbohydrates. Everyone happy with that? Sugars. Where does the plant put that energy? Because that's energy. It was solar energy, and now the plant's created chemical energy. 2 carbons bound together is a carbohydrate. Sugar, simple sugar is a simple one. Where does the plant put that energy? What does it do with it?
Bacteria.
Yep, so it does put some into the soil. So this plant is putting some of that energy or the carbs down into the soil. And what's the technical name of that process where plants give out some of those sugars into the soil? You mentioned it before. Exudates, exude. So plants exude some, but where else does the plant put some of that energy? It builds it into top growth and root system growth. So all plants on planet Earth put their energy into top growth, root growth, and the third place they put it into is they give some of those sugars out into the soil around them. So they allocate it in those 3 places. There is a 4th, which is respiration, but for the purposes of soil mainly, it's top growth, root growth, and exudation. There's a grazier I work with up in Mudgee, New South Wales. He just says, oh, exudation's a bit technical for me, Dave. I just like the word dribble. So plants dribble. So we'll get you to dribble a bit, please, Mr. Plant. I don't know why you're looking at me, mate. You've got to do the business. Yeah.
Is that the glue?
That's what we're looking for, dribble. Yep. All right, so this plant is exudating or dribbling. It's giving some of the sugars out into the soil around it. Yep, slow down, slow down. So this plant, it's still doing it now, but once it stops photosynthesising, while any plant is actively photosynthesising, they are putting some of the sugars that they create into the soil around them. And you can see how that has modified that topsoil. It's changed from a mineral soil into a topsoil. The addition of that sugars and that photosynthase. Yep. So you're busy dribbling. What's the question we've got to ask ourselves when we're seeing exudation? Why do plants do it? Why have plants evolved this process?
Because they can't walk around.
They can't work. So what else do they need? They needed sunlight. They get that already. They needed water, which they build a root system to do. What was the 4th ingredient? Nutrients. And plants can't just get up and say, gee, I was born on this crappy granite soil, I'm going to go over there where there's that basalt. They've got to get what they can from their root system. So plants have got to have evolved ways to access nutrients. Yep. Otherwise, how are they going to get their nutrients? So if you think back to when algae and before land plants evolved, if you're a seaweed in the sea, how do they get their nutrients? Where are their nutrients? They're dissolved in water. So does everyone see that they're already readily available? But where are most of our nutrients when we come out on minerals and rocks? Most of your nutrients are not readily soluble. So plants have somehow got to get these nutrients released. So what they've done over time is that they've evolved a partnership with how many bacteria? Fungi. So there's a whole community that they have evolved with. So you guys are all up to date with your human health stuff. So who have we evolved with as humans? What's inside our guts? A microbiome. It's not a lot of fungi. There's yeasts and bacteria. But we have a whole complex human community of microbes that live with us. How important are those guys to our health? Critical. Anyone got any digestive issues and irritable bowel? Like I live with irritable bowel, so when that community gets out of whack, it throws the whole system out. So the same things happen underground. Plants have co-evolved with a complex community of life, and the reason that they give out sugars is that everything on Earth needs two key things to eat for nutrition. Everything needs carbohydrates. We all need carbohydrates except for Pete Evans. You can wipe that one out. Everyone else needs carbohydrates. Yep. So the other thing is everyone else apart from Pete, well Pete needs these, everyone needs nutrients. So we all need carbs and we all need nutrients. So who's into grazing? Who's a grazier here? Who's got cattle and sheep? What's the general jargon we talk about when we're talking about the feed for animals? We talk about energy and what's the other? Protein. Energy and protein. So what I'd suggest to you is that cows need more than protein. They need calcium, zinc, copper, so they need all the nutrients. So if you just think of everything on Earth, including us and bacteria and cows and dogs, everything needs energy, carbs, sugar, and everything needs nutrients. So the reason that this plant is giving out energy into the soil is because all of that community of life needs energy, and it will do that as long as it gets what? Something in return. Yep, so it's chasing nutrients. All right, this plant is chasing nutrients. I don't know about this shire here, but most shires around Australia do not spend ratepayers' money fertilising much the parks, lawns, but you don't have to go far to see a bit of grass growing without any fertiliser. So that grass has been able to access whatever it needs from whatever's in the soil. So which nutrients does this plant need? Gets its energy from the photosynthesis, so what are its nutrients that it needs? Calcium, phosphorus, magnesium, nitrogen, zinc, potassium, boron, molybdenum. You can look at the soil test that you'll be going over later with Rebecca. So there's a whole list of nutrients that plants need, correct? Plants need it. So this plant has to get it from where? The soil. So this plant has had to evolve ways to access nutrients from its root system. So we're going to explore that now. I'm just going to pick on two for this morning. I'm going to pick on nitrogen and phosphorus. Where's most of the nitrogen that grass out there is looking for? Because it needs nitrogen. Those trees need nitrogen. Where's most of our nitrogen? In the air. Most of the nitrogen on planet Earth, or a great majority of it, lives in the air as a gas. We saw how much of the air is carbon dioxide. It was what? 0.04%. Does anyone want to have a guess how much of the atmosphere that we're breathing now is nitrogen? 78%, nearly 80%. So nearly 80% of the air we breathe is nitrogen. Is this park, are the plants in this park short of nitrogen? Is there nitrogen around? There is hundreds of tons of nitrogen. What's the challenge and the problem that living things on planet Earth have with this nitrogen? Because there's oodles there, accessing it, getting it available. So the nitrogen's in the air, and what's nature? What has nature had to evolve ways to get it out of the air and into the soil? So somehow nature over hundreds of millions or billions of years has evolved ways to get nitrogen from being a gas, where there's heaps of it, into the soil so it's available for life. So what are the ways that it happens? Rain is one, and what was another one? Do plants do it?
With
Clovers, symbiotic relation. It's actually not the plant, it's a bacteria that lives with the plant. So all over planet Earth there are certain specialised bacteria that can grab nitrogen out of the air. They're called nitrogen fixing bacteria. That's a fun name. So there's lots of them. There's different specialised guys, but they all live in the soil and they grab nitrogen out of the air. And so we're going to have a look at a few of those guys because it's a really important way that nature's evolved to get nitrogen out of the air. So we're looking for a bacteria that's in the nitrogen game. Have a look at your card. If you can't read it because you've got no brains because you're a bacteria, then just get your neighbour to look at it for you. Yep.
Another question said the nitrogen that the plant pulls out of the air uses...
The plant doesn't pull it out. Plants can't pull out nitrogen. Only bacteria have evolved that trick. Bacteria are the only organism that have evolved that trick. biologically to pull nitrogen.
David's saying is that if a plant can fix its own nitrogen, it's got a symbiosis with a bacteria.
Yeah, which
And that's what. And there's all different levels of that. They're not all just legumes, but most of them are.
yeah. So we're going to explore that now. So we're looking for the first one. So who are you, sir? Where do you live? Don't say you live.
Plant roots.
Good. Don't say Castlemaine. All right. So you live on plant roots. Here's a plant. So out you come.
Not sitting at his feet, am I?
No, no. I could do that to you, but I won't torture you. Okay. So here's a plant. Here's a bacteria. This bacteria has evolved. This is the soil, gentlemen. It's not that friendly. All right? So this bacteria has evolved. You've got no brain, so don't talk. Right? This bacteria has evolved to live literally inside the root of certain plants. Why has it adapted there? Why has it evolved to live there? Everything evolves for a reason, adapts for a reason. What does it get by living there? Energy. It's really close to the sugar. It's close to its energy source. So it's adapted itself to live there. But is this plant going to let it live there and take carbohydrates unless it gets something in return? It's going to. Okay. So the other specialisation that this bacteria has evolved is it can grab nitrogen from the air. It can fix it in the same way that plants fix carbon. This bacteria has specialised to fix nitrogen. So I've got some nitrogen. Hang on a minute. So how much of the air is nitrogen? Nearly 80%. So there's oodles of nitrogen in the air, and you're able to fix that nitrogen and pull it out of the air, but you need energy to do it. So you grab the nitrogen. Where in the soil, what has to be flowing? Well, one, you don't have a brain, so how are you going to work it out? I'll wait and see. So where's the air got to be flowing for that bacteria to get the nitrogen? It's got to be through pores. It's got to be, there has to be pores or porosity in the soil for good airflow. So that's one reason why air is so important in soil for nitrogen content. So this bacteria doesn't have a brain, and it needs carbohydrate, and you're chasing nitrogen because it's an essential element. I like a proactive plant. Are you happy with that? I'm not asking you. Righto.
Because I'm a bacteria.
You must be genetically modified because you're self-aware. I like it. Okay, so can everyone see that this bacteria and this plant are living in a relationship? What's the name of that relationship? Symbiotic. It's a win-win. Yep, the plant gives the bacteria energy, and in return, the bacteria gives the plant nitrogen. What's the common group of plants that most of us are familiar with that have these kind of partners living with them? The legume family. Someone want to give me some examples? Clovers, wattles, yep, all your legume, sorry, chickpeas, yep, all your beans, correct, yep. Casuarinas have another species, not this, but there are other nitrogen-fixing bacteria, as was pointed out earlier. But this one, does everyone see that this one has to live in the roots, inside the roots? So does anyone know the structures that they live in the roots, what they're called? Nodules. So these guys live in the nodules. Yep, so they're nitrogen-fixing bacteria. What's the technique? Anyone know the actual technical name of this particular variety of bacteria? Starts with R. Rhizobia. This is the Rhizobia family. Yep, so Rhizobia is the one. Has anyone ever bought legume seed and also bought the coating to put on the seed? So that's what you're buying, the inoculum, these guys. Yep. So how much nitrogen can these guys bring in to a hectare of pasture in this area, or a sugarcane paddock in North Queensland, or anywhere? What's the maximum, do we know? Anyone know how much sort of kilos of nitrogen you can get brought into your soil through legumes? What's heaps mean? So that's a question I have for you, because nitrogen's the favourite fertiliser of most people on planet Earth. But if we can work with these guys and they can bring in some of the nitrogen, and we know how much they can bring in, maybe we can reduce or eliminate or just get more efficient with our fertiliser, nitrogen fertilisers, because we're getting the bacteria to help us. I'll give you an example while we're on the topic. This is a North Queensland sugarcane farmer. I'll hand it around at morning tea or lunch. up near Ingham. Anyone been up to Ingham ever? The wet tropics. So these guys they're on the barrier reef. So we all the rest of us think they're naughty and hitting them with a stick. So Alan Lynn's been growing a multi-species legume crop now. It's 4 legumes and a sunflower in the mix, and he's been able to lower his nitrogen from 180 units of nitrogen, which is 180 kilos a hectare, to 120, and his yield's gone up as his soil has improved. So he keeps on going, he's trying to go as low as he can go, but that's an example for you of how much nitrogen you can actually pull into the topsoil. In a tropical environment, it can be 150, 200 kilos of nitrogen.
He's a cane grower.
He's a cane farmer, yeah. So that's the rotation in between cane crops, yeah.
Can he get to a point where he doesn't need any external nitrogen?
That's what some of them are trialling, yeah. But they have to do it in a careful way because they're running a business. So we actually got a project going at Tully, seeing how low we can go. But you've also got to have other aspects like multi-species and legumes and all the rest of it, going no-till and all that. So nitrogen fixation, are there other bacteria living in your topsoil that grab nitrogen? Let's have a look. Who else is in the nitrogen game? So what are you? You're a free living. This one here is completely dependent on the plant. So you don't live in the plant, you just live near the plant in the dribble zone. You live in the dribble zone. Does anyone know the technical name for the dribble zone? Rhizosphere, thank you. The rhizosphere. So this bacteria over here lives in the rhizosphere, means right close to the plant, just where there's lots of carbohydrates. But you're also able to fix nitrogen. So as long as you're within the dribble zone, yeah. I'm glad you guys didn't go for it because that's not your food. I know it's too unhealthy for you guys. Yeah. But that bacteria loves simple sugars, and they will also be able to grab some nitrogen. That's a specialised bacteria. Not all bacteria can do it. Does anyone know how nitrogen fertilisers are made? Urea and ammonia. What's that?
A hay wash person?
Yes. Do you want to highlight that? Do you know when that was invented, or you know who invented it? No, it was World War I. Before World War I. Yeah. So 2 guys, Haber and Bosch. Power tools, Bosch, yep, and they actually won the Nobel Prize for Chemistry, and they got nitrogen or atmospheric air and put a lot of electricity into it, and they created soluble nitrogen, and then bombs were invented and all kinds of fun things, ammonia. But you need a lot of energy. So what do these bacteria need to do their job? Lots of carbs. They need lots of carbs. They have been round the ridges, these lollies too, by the way, so wouldn't eat them, yeah. They haven't had their 6 monthly refresh, yeah. What's that? Okay, so does everyone see that one of the challenges is to get nitrogen out of the air and into the topsoil for life, and that nitrogen-fixing bacteria are the main way that happens on planet Earth. Lightning is an important secondary process, and also the plant, does everyone see that the plant drives that process because it can feed and maintain? So some of them are very specialised, like the legume rhizobia, and other ones you're still specialised, but you don't live in the plant. You're free living. Yep.
So lightning actually is the energy that transfers it when you have a thunderstorm come through.
Correct. So if you've got nitrogen in the air is a gas, it's 2 nitrogen stuck together, and lightning cracks that bond. It's a very tight bond.
Okay.
It splits it, so now it's in a dissolved form, and then it can be washed in the rain down into the soil. Yeah, but it's not usually more than 2 to 5 kilos per hectare per annum on planet Earth, in most parts of planet Earth. Yeah.
Is that higher in the tropics?
A little bit. They've been doing modelling for the barrier reef stuff. They've done a lot of high, and the estimate we're using for the nitrogen projects around Ingham Tully is 5 kilos. So it's still not a lot.
So the actual process of creating synthetic nitrogen is...
It's energy intensive.
Right.
So they built, if you ever go to Karratha in northwest WA, the gas just over the back of the hill is a nitrogen factory. Cheap gas, and a deep water port to send it to India. Yeah, you need to build your nitrogen factory near cheap energy.
And that's in a physical form?
Ammonia, to make ammonia, yeah. And then from that you can make other secondary products.
So waterlogged soils don't fix very good nitrogen?
Yeah, well you change the dynamic completely,
Air pockets as much?
Yeah, correct. You do have other anaerobic or non-air breathing or non-oxygen breathing bacteria, but I'm not sure many of them are nitrogen fixers. Yeah.
There's another aspect of nitrogen. It's got a negative charge, and most other minerals are positive, and they're held by the clay particles that have got a negative charge, and so you don't lose them so quickly. Whereas nitrogen is always free in the soil, so if there's lots of water and it's moving, well, it goes.
Yeah.
So that's sort of...
Yeah, there is one place else you can hold it, in organic matter. So that's where it's held. So as long as you can hold it there, but otherwise, yeah, it's at risk of leaching. Yeah.
Humus in the soil has got 80 kg of nitrogen.
Yeah. So we'll come back to that and explore that a little bit more. Yeah. Yes.
Can I just add,
Yeah.
you're assuming that these soils are sort of adequately hydrated, and if they're not
Yeah.
going into this process.
And the temperature's okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
And also, a lot of soils around here basically don't have the topsoil.
Yep.
It's been removed.
This session's about topsoil.
Yes.
So I'm not talking about dead soil, crappy soil, shitty soil, disaster soil. I'm talking about a functioning topsoil. At the end of this session, we can get human activity on here and destroy it, no problem. But at the moment, what I'm trying to show you is how a high functioning topsoil works, because this is what we're aiming for. Yeah.
I'm just trying to sort
Yeah.
of contextualise.
Yeah, and it's the same all around Australia. Yeah.
Tropical soils are fundamentally...
I mainly work in non-tropical areas, temperate areas, so from Armidale in northern New South Wales, cool temperate. So, but it's the same everywhere, the same processes.
An
Yeah.
important point, if I may,
Yep.
David,
Yep.
excuse me,
Yeah.
is the process.
I
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah.
Whether it's a lot of process or only a little bit of process is tropical or our local.
Yeah. Yeah. The same nitrogen fixing occurs in tropics, cool temperate, warm temperate, all over planet Earth.
It's more the quantification. Like
Yep.
You're giving numbers and approaches.
Yeah.
I'm interested in how that varies. Like,
Yeah, so I was waiting, the reason I asked the question here was how many, does anyone know in this area of Australia what your sort of per hectare rate might be? And that's actually homework I'm going to give you guys, because I know what the estimate for cool temperate pastures is, but if everyone's focusing on legumes in their pasture, which most people do, how can we know, do we have enough nitrogen coming in for our grasses and our stock as well? There are rules of thumb. So can I work out how much nitrogen I'm getting into my temperate pasture around here if the soil's in reasonable condition? And then is that enough for what I'm aiming to do? Yeah, it's a really important management question.
So you'll cover that during the day?
Yep, but I've got to give everyone some homework, otherwise, there you go. Yep, yep, that's right, yep.
Can you just talk a bit more about the impact of temperature?
Yep, temperature affects every microbial process in the soil, whether it's nitrogen fixation, breakdown of organic matter, which we'll cover, solubilisation of phosphorus. Any microbial process is influenced by temperature. So as temperature drops down, you slow down those processes, right? As temperature speeds up, you increase those processes.
With limits at either end?
Sure, yeah. So, you know, when you're culturing things, if anyone's ever done homebrew or biofertiliser or made cheese or yogurt or anything, everyone sort of knows what that optimum kind of range is, yep. There are bacteria that are highly tolerant of really cold, frozen conditions, and there's thermophilic bacteria that are tolerant of really hot. But most functioning bacteria in terrestrial soils, in agricultural landscapes, they need a sort of more benign range. Yeah.
What's that?
Yep, so somewhere, say, over 18 degrees, up to about 30, 35. So I was over in the Wimmera last year, and the guys were measuring topsoil temperature about 3 centimetres down at 58 degrees. So that's composting temperature. So thermophilic composting microbes would be tolerant in that, but most topsoil bacteria in a normal aerated topsoil in the warm, semi-arid area of Australia, it's too hot for them. Yeah. And when you go into the Northern Territory, in the Northern Territory, a lot of the soil organisms shut down. Even when you irrigate, they still shut down because they've evolved to shut down. And so you find this 4 or 5 month period up in the wet, dry tropics where even when you irrigate, they don't kick in.
Is that just like dormant?
Yeah.
So that's what the order system for.
Yeah, well, it just means you've got to manage those soils, understanding the local context of them. Yeah.
That's what soil colours.
Yep, correct. I'm going to jump over to phosphorus because we've had a quick look at nitrogen, and we'll come back to nitrogen and see where it goes, because it's like Donald Trump's Twitter account. It'll move where you don't know where it'll go. So let's have a look at phosphorus. So we saw that nitrogen mainly lives where? In the Earth's atmosphere. Does anyone know where most of the phosphorus on planet Earth is? Because plants need phosphorus. Where's most of our phosphorus? In the ground, yep. What forms it? Where does it mainly live in?
Organic matter.
It doesn't, most of it's not in organic matter. It's mainly in minerals. So phosphorus is a very different element to nitrogen. Nitrogen on planet Earth is what we call a gaseous element. It lives as a gas in the atmosphere, and the challenge that nature and we have in agriculture is to get it out of being a gas and into the topsoil. Phosphorus, on the other hand, loves to live as a sediment. It's a sedimentary element. It lives in minerals, and generally, what do we say about phosphorus in the soil? That it's fairly unavailable, locked up, because it likes to live in inorganic, unavailable, insoluble forms in minerals. So I've got some phosphorus. So that phosphorus, don't you jump into it. Most of the phosphorus on planet Earth is it tends to be in mineral form, and it tends to be inorganic and unavailable. Insoluble is the term we use. So what is nature's challenge? To make it soluble, to make it available for life. So what are the ways in ecology that have evolved over billions of years to make phosphorus more soluble? Because there's a number of ways that nature makes phosphorus available.
Create an acid. Yeah, humic acid.
Acids, yep. So how do you create an acid if you're not a human being and you're buying humic acids and all this sort of stuff? So forget people. How has nature made acids to release phosphorus from rocks? Bacteria. So some bacteria might create an acid. Anyone else? Yep. Yes. So some plants, their own dribble has organic acids. They are organic acids, the dribble. They're not sugars. And those organic acids can... Yep. So does anyone know a plant that's... CSIRO identified this one in the 80s that does that? That's lupins. Yep, lupins. Most of the legumes have greater or lesser, but a lot of the perennial grasses can also do that as well to greater or lesser extent. Yep. I'll just do it. So will you dribble an organic acid for us? And that's a mineral with some phosphorus on it. And that acid released the phosphorus, and then the plant took it up. Yep. So that breakdown of phosphorus and release of phosphorus is called solubilization, or making soluble. And the tool that nature uses to break nutrients from minerals is acids. Does anyone know how they make superphosphate? Yes. They get sulfuric acid and they treat the rock phosphate. So the rock phosphate is inorganic phosphorus, and they whack it with sulfuric acid. So has anyone bought superphosphate? Yep, so it has sulfur in it. That sulfur hasn't come from the rocks, it's come from the sulfuric acid that they've treated it with. Yep, so we've got plants, some plants are able to access their own phosphorus. What's another way that nature can release phosphorus with acids? Someone said a bacteria. Yep, some fungi. So there's some fungi around, so we're looking for a fungi. Where do you live, Mr. Fungi?
Organic matter.
Yep, don't want you. Where do you live, Mr. Fungi?
Plant roots.
You live on plant roots. Here's a nice looking plant root. Out you come. Come on out.
We're making our host look pretty bad here. It's a bit weak compared to the rest of us, isn't it? Like the size of us.
I know. It's because you're sucking all the energy out of them. So does everyone see that just like this bacteria that's evolved to live in plant root, this particular specialised fungi has also evolved to live half in the plant root. So it actually infects or colonises the plant root. So the technical term you could say is that it actually infects the root. So once it's in the root, why has it done that? Why has it adapted to infect roots like that? It's chasing carbohydrates, it's chasing its sugar, carbs. We all need energy. So the other thing though is that the other half of this fungi, or the other part of this fungi is not in the root, only a little bit of it's in the root. The other part of it is out exploring the soil. What's the name of those Mycelium is the collective name. Hyphae, fungal hyphae. So the other half of this fungi, and you can see what they look like hyphae, there's the technical drawing. Yep, everyone's seen fungal hyphae. So they're exploring the soil. Yep, they're out exploring the soil. How many kilometres were there? Hundreds to thousands, exploring the soil. We're at the 3 micron scale here. We've all zoomed down to 3-5 micron. And when that fungi comes just past a mineral particle of soil that happens to have phosphorus on it, what will it do? This specialised fungi, spit an acid on it, spit an acid. So we'll get you to spit an acid on that. And then it can take it up. So this is a specialised fungi that can spit on rocks. You're a rock spitter basically, but you need energy to do that. So Mr. Plant, you need phosphorus. So you guys do the deal. There's a bit of bias going on towards the fungi here, but anyway. Does everyone stop being grumpy, mate, or I'll get the herbicide out? Does everyone see that this plant has co-evolved with this fungal partner? Without this fungal partner, most plants on Earth, before we come along with soluble fertilisers, have a hard time. So that a lot of plants on Earth have co-evolved with fungal partners that half live in them, so they're symbiotic with them. Yep. What's the name of this kind of fungi? It was mentioned just before. Mycorrhizal or VAM. And the other modern jargon that we're supposed to use now, so VAM is now out of date, so AMF is the more technical term, but VAM, so VAM is, everyone heard of VAM? Most people. Mycorrhizal, has everyone heard of mycorrhizal? Yep, I think that's how you spell it. So that's the common term. The technical name for most of these guys is that, but VAM is what, we still use VAM quite a lot. Sorry?
What does AMF stand for?
Arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. And that one's vesicular arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. I think that's now the correct term, so I've got to be careful to use correct terms with you.
What's the arbuscular?
It's the structure that they put in the root inside the cell of the plant. That's an arbuscle. Yep.
Where they store stuff.
Yep, and that's where they get the hold of their energy in there as well. Yep.
So, given that this plant requires the phosphorus to thrive, and
yes,
obviously,
yep.
Nitrogen.
Yep.
What happens if you actually just pulled the phosphorus away? What visual difference would you see to the plant at that?
It will, if it was short in phosphorus, it'd get phosphorus deficiency, so it might not grow, or it could get blue leaves or purpley leaves, and it could be stunted growth. Yeah.
So part of the challenge for us is to start at that end and say, okay, diagnose what's missing in our pastures, and go, okay, it must be phosphorus is deficient.
Yeah, but I'm going to come to it from the soil end and say, what's the everyone saw that this kind of bacteria lives with legumes. Everyone happy with that? Does anyone know the families of plants on planet Earth that have these kind of fungal partners, helping them with phosphorus, zinc, calcium, at least those 3 elements?
Most everything except brassicas.
Great. Almost all plants on planet Earth have evolved this relationship. So the challenge in agriculture is not to disturb this too much. And when we do, well, too much fertilising, yeah, definitely. And free feed's a good feed, yeah. Yeah. Farming deeper is farming cheaper. We'll come to that one too, yeah. Yep.
When we put soluble phosphorus on the fertiliser when you plant the seed, and the trigger for the plant to make the association with the mycorrhizal fungi spore is lack of phosphorus. And the plant will send out an exudate with a certain chemical that stimulates the spore to germinate, and then there's a whole process for let it in the plant. And so when we put super on, or whatever, MAP, DAP, it completely stuffs that up, and then you don't get the association early. And if you don't get the association early, the physiology of that plant will be completely different.
Yep, so that overdoing that solubility in the root zone particularly with the seed and that young plant, is critical for getting this partnership going. But the problem is, what's the right level and what is the balance? And this is what obviously soil testing and field experience and assessing your soil biology in the paddock, which is, today just touches on, but some of you obviously been on that game for a while. I guess I'm just sort of showing you what's hard to see under a microscope, and it's a very subtle balance, as you pointed out, and we can throw that balance out big time. Yeah. And so another example for you is, again, sorry to go back to cane, but it's just we've got lots of money for the barrier reef, so we're doing lots of really good research around multi-species. But so the guys up there around Ingham and Mackay, I don't know if anyone saw the cane farmer at Mackay that was growing sunflowers with his sugarcane at the same time, Simon Matson. Yep, Simon. So Simon's found, since he's had sunflowers in his rotation, he's found about a 600-fold increase in these fungi living in his topsoil. So in the last 3 years. So we know that some plants have a stronger association with mycorrhizal fungi, but most plants on earth, except your brassicas. So if you were growing canola year in, year out, and bare fallow between them, which most people don't do because it's pretty not good practice, but if you just had a couple of brassica crops and bare fallow, then the numbers of these guys will drop considerably, the spores or the carrying over species.
So is he getting increased productivity as a result of that?
Well, it's all about profit. So in cane, you can increase your productivity, but if you're spending too much money to get there, correct. Yeah. If I can maintain a reasonable yield and lower my costs and also not hit the reef with excess nutrient, well, everyone's getting a win. So that's sort of what we're trying to do. Yeah.
Is he growing that with the sugarcane, or is he growing it as and then terminating it as a cover?
Yeah, he's done a couple of different tactics. So he's done it as a single species cover crop. He's done it as within a multi-species cover crop, and he's done it as a dual crop at the same time as the cane.
That's terminating.
Yeah, he's harvested it. So yeah,
so he's taking it all away.
So with the dual species, cane and sugar together, and sunflowers together, he actually harvested both crops that same year.
Oh, okay.
So he harvested his sunflowers and then he harvested the sugarcane a couple of months later.
Okay. So he's like, you just use it so he's getting it for the seed, it's doing it with the header or something?
Yep, yeah. Correct. Yep. Okay, so we've got this guy here helping this plant. Does everyone see that? So there's other ways that phosphorus gets released. There are some other bacteria and fungi that live here that don't live in the plant root, and they also are rock spitters. And there's another way. In some soils that are really acidic, where you have high acidity, what does that mean when I say soils are acidic? What are we talking about? Yeah, low pH, yep, and hydrogen's floating around, so free hydrogen. So when you have a soil that has a lot of acidity, then the natural acidity of the soil, particularly under high rainfall, say 700 mil rainfall and above, you will get some natural release of, because you've got natural acidity. But I'd like you just to pause and think about a soil with a pH of 8 or 9, like a black cracking soil in the cropping zone of New South Wales, which has a pH of 8 and a 9, so it's an alkaline soil. There's no natural acidity. So natural acidity cannot release phosphorus. So what does that kind of farming system completely depend on for good phosphorus cycling? Biological process. Yeah.
Sorry, did you say that rain creates acidity?
Rain helps drive that acidification. So where you have an acid soil, which is usually in higher rainfall areas of Australia. Yeah.
If the brassicas don't have mycorrhizal fungi, do they serve another useful function? Or
no, we should kill every brassica on the planet Earth. Yes, they've just evolved different ways. Yeah.
Class 2, second class.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. I better keep moving because I know I'm going to be way over time otherwise. So I'm just going to speed things up. I'm sorry about this. So if I sort of jump over questions and don't get caught in discussion, I do apologise. So we've got the plant growing. So when plants grow, what happens? What do they do? What do they create? We talked about it first up. They create roots, and what else do they create? Organic matter. So some of it's a root system, some of it's a top system, and some of it is dribble. So plants create 3 types of organic matter. They create root systems, tops, and dribble. So as they grow, they create organic matter. So that organic matter, if everyone's happy, I'm sorry I'm on the ground a bit, but that organic matter is everything from simple sugars right through to, it's all organic matter. And what is that organic matter? And green leaf, it's all organic matter. I've got bark, I've got chips, I've got dead roots. all of that organic matter, what has it got in it? What does it contain? Carbon and what else? Nutrients. Organic matter contains carbon and nutrients. All right, so when soils get fed organic matter, either on the top as litter or underground as roots and dribble and dying things, what happens to that organic matter? Where does it go? How does it go? Where does it, you're saying it goes into the soil?
Feeds the microbes.
Feeds microbes. What happens to most organic matter over 12, 18 months? Breaks down. What's the proof? What's our evidence that it breaks down?
Humus.
Oh, so we just build up lots of humus? No. Do most soils build up lots of humus at the moment? So where does all this... Yeah, where does it go? We know it breaks down, so who breaks it down? The microbes. All right, so who likes to eat organic matter? Have a look at your cards. Who have we got? So you're a fungi, you eat organic matter. I'll come back to you in a minute, Mr. Potworm and the blue. So you're a bacteria. We'll come back to the termite in a minute. So I've got a fungi here. This fungi likes to eat organic matter. Notice how this fungi is different than this one. That one is a specialised fungi that lives in the root system. This one just eats crap. So that's your paleo diet. Right? And if you're not happy with that, old mate, you can eat that. Everyone notice the quality of organic matter that fungi like to eat? What would you say? Complex. Yep. Quite woody. Quite woody. Yep. Pete Evans would be upset with me. Okay, what about bacteria? What type of organic matter do bacteria like to eat? Simple, easy to digest. So we've got a bacteria there and we've got one here. So there's your paleo diet. There's yours. Yummy. Does everyone see that organic matter, I better just get a bit more of that. That organic matter contains both carbon and nutrients. Is everyone happy with that? Whether it's simple to digest stuff or it's this woody stuff, it's going to have energy and it's going to have nutrients. All right, so those guys are decomposers. How many decomposers are there in a topsoil? Heaps, millions. If I have dribble, then I've got lots of bacteria. So we talked before about having trillions of bacteria. Most of the bacteria in those trillions that we talked about are living on simple soluble compounds, simple soluble organic matter, mainly from dribble exudation. Yep, so they're going crazy. If there's more woody, complex stuff around, then you're encouraging fungi, and both of them are yeast as well. They're eating away, happily eating away. All right, so anyone like to eat fungi or bacteria?
Have to.
All right, who do you eat? Nematodes. If you've got a nematode card, hold it up. Oh yeah, I'll just start with these yellow ones. These two yellow cards. Protozoa, where's our other protozoa? Who's got the other yellow card? I know someone's got it. No, you're a fungi. Sorry, I forgot to give you your food. There you go. Protozoa. No. So do you want to show everyone what a protozoa looks like? So does everyone see that these are yellow? What does yellow mean? Got no brains? They're also microscopic. You're microscopic. So you guys are a little bit bigger than fungi and bacteria. And you guys actually, you mainly, all your life is you eat bacteria and sometimes fungi. So does everyone remember Pac-Man, that game? So what did Pac-Man eat?
Ghosts.
What colour were the ghosts? No.
Blue?
You get a chocolate. And what was the thing they mainly eat when they're not eating ghosts?
Little round things.
Called?
What were those little round things?
What were those little round things? Power pills. Okay, so protozoa, you pretty much move through this part of the topsoil and you eat bacteria. That's your life, and every now and again you might eat something a bit more scrumptious like a bit of bacteria or yeast. Right, so I'll get you guys to get up and eat the nearest bacteria or fungi that's got some nutrients. So there's a bacteria down here that's got nutrients, and there's some guys down here that have got nutrients, but there's no way you're going to get food if you just sit there on your bum. Now it's not a grazing event. It's not a grazing event, so you're a predator, so you eat a whole. Yeah. Righto. Take it back. Here's a couple over here. Yep.
So just take the lot.
Take the lot. You don't eat wood. When a fungi tricks you into eating wood, just ignore them. You're just, yeah, that's it. Okay, does everyone see that the protozoa are the first level of what we call predators in the soil ecosystem here? They are preying on bacteria and sometimes fungi and sometimes yeast. So you guys are predators. You're like Pac-Man, you just move. How many bacteria here? Trillions. And so if there's trillions of active bacteria that the dribble's feeding, then you guys are there in numbers as well, and you're eating. All right. What does every living thing do after they eat? Shit, poo. So we'll get you, protozoa, just as you're moving through the topsoil here. This is the active zone, just to do the business for us. Not everything, not everything.
Not everything?
No, you need something for yourself on me. Righto, and then go. Thank you, very kind of you. Righto, thanks for that. All right, what just happened there? I know they, sorry? That's right, the nutrients have cycled. We've just cycled nutrients. Let's have a look, let's break it down. So where did nitrogen start today? Where did it start off this morning? In the air. How did we get nitrogen into the topsoil? In this case, here's an example here. What did this bacteria need? Oh, gee, you're getting more advanced every moment. What did this bacteria need to get nitrogen out of the air? What did it need? It needed energy. It needed carbon. Without carbon, there's no way you're going to get nitrogen fixation. So now it got a bit of energy, so it was able to grab the nitrogen. So then the plant needed some of that nitrogen, correct? For the plant to get that nitrogen, what does it have to do with this bacteria? Carbon's got to move. Does everyone see the deal? So you want to do the deal for us? So for that nitrogen to cycle, yeah, just stop thinking too much. You're thinking too much. You haven't got much neurons in there. Just slow down. So now the nitrogen is attached with? It's organic nitrogen. It's in an organic form. As soon as you attach any nutrient to carbon, what have you done to it? But it's also stable. Nitrogen will not go as a gas when it's attached to carbon. It will not leach readily when it's attached to carbon. Yeah.
That's a critical phase. When you have inorganic nitrogen and organic nitrogen, the same thing for phosphorus as well.
Every nutrient, as soon as you attach a nutrient to carbon, because who actually likes a simple phosphorus or nitrogen attached with carbon? Who's going to look at that and go, yum? How many bacteria are living here in this zone? And they love simple soluble stuff, because bacteria, you don't have a brain. Where's the other bacteria? You don't have a brain, right? You're brainless, but you also don't have a stomach. You can't, red cordial is all they can eat. Why are you giving them a stick? They can't eat it. So when that plant drops a little bit of leaf in the ground, highly digestible leaf, the nitrogen is now attached with carbon. Everyone happy with that? So who's going to look at that? When you have a million bacteria here, what are they going to do? Gee, there's my carbs and my nutrient. So then the bacteria is going to grab it. If it's in a bit more woody, if there's a bit more carbon, then who's going to grab it? Yep.
Yeah.
No, I'll give it to the bacteria. So now the nitrogen, but see how for that bacteria to eat your nitrogen, what do they need to have? Carbon. They need their carbs. And this is the problem with over-soluble fertilising. If I just load the soil up, because more is better, and growing deeper is not cheaper, the shallow roots are the way to make money. So if I load the soil up with nitrogen, let's just pause it there. We've just put a big dose of soluble nitrogen fertiliser out. How much of that fertiliser will the plant get? Someone want to give me a rule of thumb? How much when you put out soluble nitrogen?
45 in a split.
Let's say 45, okay. I'm going to say 50% maximum. So the plant during the season will get 50% of that. So the other 50% of the nitrogen you put out, it's got to go somewhere. Where's it going to go? It's not just going to sit there. Potentially it can go up, or it can leach away in water. Where's the third place that that nitrogen can go? They can assimilate it as long as you have carbon. As soon as I take away the organic soil carbon and just leave excess nitrogen, you can't eat it. It's like eating just sauce without the pasta, which I know Pete Evans eats that, but everyone else eats that. Does everyone see you need that balance of the two? Yep. So that's the problem when you throw this balance out. So that's why we need carbon. So now that nitrogen is in the bacteria's body, is it a bad or a good thing that the bacteria should be able to eat most of your nitrogen fertiliser? It's good because as long as it keeps. Yep, so now you've got it. Who's going to look at that bacteria? Because you've only got 15 minutes to live. So who's going to look at that bacteria? Pac-Man. So you'll come along and have a feed. So you're chasing energy and nitrogen as well. And just so happens that protozoa, they crap about 60% of everything they eat. Yep.
60%.
Do a mental picture on your breakfast. Yep. So they have a high rate of release, correct. So you'll keep the carbon and use it, but you'll put out the excess you don't need of these. Is that in an available or a locked up form at that point? Where's it happened? Whereabouts in the soil has it happened? In the root zone, where all the action is. So anyone know the name of that process where organic matter, in this case living organic matter and or dead organic matter, gets broken down or eaten and some of the nutrients get released out from that breakdown process? It's not humification, yeah. Mineralisation. That's the breakdown and release of nutrients out of organic matter. Yeah.
You can actually, the protozoa got a different carbon-nitrogen ratio than the bacteria.
Yep. That's why they poop up to 60%.
Most of it's an amino acid, which is the plant would rather take it up in that form than a nitrate.
Yep.
So
yep.
It's a good system.
Yep. It's the way that nature's been doing it for 400 million years. Yep. And plants have evolved to take nitrogen through that pathway. Yeah, that's how they've adapted before we come along. So who else likes to eat protozoa, fungi, bacteria? Let's have a look at your cards. So nematodes, hold up your cards. How many nematodes we got? So this nematode eats bacteria, so you're really similar to a protozoa. You're just eating crap. Yeah. And you're an aquatic organism. Protozoa, they're still aquatic organisms. You live in the films of water in the soil. You're not a terrestrial air breathing. You eat other nematodes. So you eat these kind of nematodes here and then you crap. Yep, eat crap. Everyone got the message? Yep. And then any other nematodes? We'll run out those cards on walkabout. What about the other green cards? What do we got? So we got a springtail. How many legs do springtails have? That's a side-on view. Yes. So that's not a leg, that's a fulcra. That's the spring. So that's an insect. So guess what all insects need to live and be happy? They need food and they need structure. They need pores because they're air breathing. They're not aquatic. Yep. So who do you eat? You eat nematodes. So you just eat nematodes and then you crap. Yep. And springtail. Yep. It's one of the common soil insects. And then we've got a mite. How many mites have we got? Everyone hold up your mite card. So how many legs do mites have? 8. Correct. Who are they related to? Spiders. Who do you eat, Mr. Mite?
Nematodes.
You eat nematodes and then you crap.
I eat springtails.
You eat springtails and mites and then you crap. You eat fungi and then you crap. Does everyone see that we're starting to get these layers in the food web, the soil food web, those of you who read any of Laningham stuff? So does everyone see that the more layers I have, the more crap's going on? It's a bit like Canberra. Yep. So the more layers that I get, the more I get nutrient cycling. But I have to have nutrients to start with. I have to have some fertility there. We can talk about that another day, what levels of fertility, and the soil tests later on, you'll look at that. As long as I've got some fertility, but as long as you guys, everyone see the more diversity I have in here, and it all starts with having organic matter, because everything's chasing two things, the carbs and the nutrients. And as you do that, you eat and crap, and during that process you are cycling nutrients. So does everyone see that one of the most important things that the soil biology does in the soil is cycle nutrients? The question I have for you is that we all have a trouble with soil carbon, correct? Soil carbon is everyone's bane. How do I get it up? So what happens, everyone saw where the nutrients go. If you're not using the nutrient, you'll poop it out. What about the carbon you ate? What happens to all that carbon that you've just eaten? Because you've been eating carbs while you've been eating nutrients. Where's the carbon gone? Sorry? Some of it's in your body and in the compounds in the soil, but there's somewhere else that it's going. Respiration. Respiration. What's respiration? we breathe it out. So has anyone had a lolly yet this morning? Who's eaten one of these lollies? Everyone's been really healthy. So sometimes the plant has like 8 before I've even done the first session. It's like they've got a problem. So if you were silly enough to eat one of these lollies, a minty, what are you actually eating? Nutrients or carbs? Carbs. So what does your body do with carbs, with the carbon in the carbs? It gives you heat. You're a mammal. What else does it do? It helps you energy to do things. And when you're finished with it, and you'll store some of it when you get to a certain age, and when you're young, you'll use it for growth. Yeah. And so all it is a chain of carbon. Who made that chain? Who made it? Who made this chain of carbs? The plant. That's photosynthesis. The plant grabs single carbon out of the air and turns it into carbohydrate. Carbohydrate is just a chain of carbon. So we eat that, we break it apart. When we're finished with the energy, most of the carbon that we've pulled apart goes where? We breathe in oxygen, and what do we breathe out? So most of the carbon in the soil ends up going back in the atmosphere as carbon dioxide. Think about a compost heap. Everyone made compost, most people. When you start a compost heap this high, how high is it in 3 months' time? It's been decomposed by a whole lot of gang like yourself. After 3 months, why has it shrunk so much? Because a lot of the carbon in it has gone respiration. Yep.
Is that true in the context of the humidification process where the carbon is actually locked in the human structure?
That's where we're going next. Okay. So the question, I guess, Dean, is it common for soils to build organic matter, agricultural soils? Is it hard to get organic matter levels up? So obviously some processes driving the carbon out. So the challenge is, how do we get more humus? Well, let's look at what humus is first. So one of the key processes in soils with carbon is is everyone happy with that term, respiration? Yeah. When we have our soil, topsoil, and it has carbon in it, or organic matter. Everyone happy that organic matter contains carbon and nutrients. And as organic matter breaks down, a lot of the carbon goes back as CO2. Sorry. Everyone happy with that? In the dry climates like deserts and the savanna, sorry to bring it in, but it's just to highlight the point, but in the northern Australia, wet, dry tropics, Darwin, and where they have an 8-month dry, where there's no rain and relentless heat. What's the other process that loses carbon that way? Does anyone know what it's called? It is also CO2? Oxidation. So the two processes are going on, oxidation and respiration. And in high wet environments, respiration is the more dominant one. Whereas here you get a bit of both, especially in a drought. Is everyone happy with that? Has everyone seen ground cover that in a really bad drought just ends up disappearing in your hand? It's not biologically broken down, it has physically broken down. But it's the same result, the carbon's not staying in the topsoil.
Actually, a good example that really stood out for me is that if you go through, say, pasture country in summertime, you've got the green phase and then it all turns brown or yellow. Yes. And then if you wait a bit longer, the yellow's still quite nutrient.
It goes grey.
It goes grey.
And then black. The black hills of near Yass in New South Wales, they're permanently black in the drought. Yeah.
And that's the oxidation.
And say if you're in the Katherine, Northern Territory, Darwin area, for 8 months of the year, this is a relentless process. And the soil community is actually adapted to deal with that. But it does slow it all down. But does everyone see that a lot of the time, if you put out chicken manure, which has carbon in it, everyone happy with that? It's organic matter. Where's most of the carbon in that go? It ends up. But does everyone see that it's good that organic matter breaks down and releases carbon? Because what else does it do? It cycles my nutrients. So I need some of my soil organic matter to be breaking down every year. I need it. Oh, sorry, don't usually grab the whiteboard, but because we're on a time, thanks. So we've got respiration where carbon dioxide's going that way, and it isn't a bad thing that some of our organic matter breaks down, and even though we lose the carbon, because it does cycle my nutrients. So just on that point, there was a wheat farmer in northern New South Wales that did this role play 7 years ago now with the LLS. We had a session, and he came up to me in the morning tea and he said, "Dave, we've always had a principle on our property. We don't care what comes on the paddock, as long as it shits before it leaves, it's welcome." That's what he said to me. And he understood mineralisation and this key process. The problem is, Okay, so we've got that. So now the other thing that Dean's just mentioned is that not all of our organic matter disappears. A lot of it does as CO2 and cycles our nutrients, but some of that organic matter stays around in the soil and turns into a more stable form, which we call humus. And what's the fancy name that the Commonwealth Government like for that process of some of my organic matter turning into humus? Sequestration. Yep, that's the term they like to use. The term in a soil science textbook is just humification. All right? So forget sequestration, forming humus. Does everyone know what a really good finished compost looks like? That's an example for you of humus, because what did you start with? You just started with a pile of organic matter. Whatever didn't go up as CO2 has remained and transformed, correct? And is now stable. So that's an example for you. Soils, obviously, it doesn't look quite like that, but that's an example for you of humus forming. Yep. So that also goes on in the soil. The problem in agricultural soils is if we're not at the point where we've lost the topsoil, is that we do a lot of disturbance and we cut that process, we disrupt that process. And we usually encourage... What does tillage do? Which one does it increase? Yeah. What about lots of soluble fertilisers? Well, they just get bacteria fired up, and what do bacteria do when they get fired up? They breathe more. You give bacteria lots of nitrogen and you'll just explode the population of bacteria, and the respiration rate will, which means your carbon will. Yep. So overgrazing where you've got no ground cover, no perennial grass roots in the system. All of those things tend to increase respiration or oxidation. So I'll just give you an example. Again, I'm sorry it's from the tropics. I do have some examples from other places, but I didn't have the picture, and this is just the best soil in Australia. So this is a vanilla grower in North Queensland. This is the same soil 10 metres apart. What do you reckon the organic matter is there compared to that? Just have a quick.
10 tons.
No. Yes.
You guys see that? You have a look at a morning tea as well. It's actually a commercial vanilla grower. So I'll just give you a little bit, because it's a great way to explain humus. I know it's outside the climate zone, but the principles, you'll see it. If you look locally, you'll find the same thing. So in the wet tropics, you've got lots of temperature and lots of moisture. So what do you think would be a common process, respiration or humus? Heaps of rain, heaps of moisture, heaps of warmth. Respiration is a really strong process in the wet tropics around the world. So generally, a lot of conventional agronomists will say it's impossible to build organic matter in sugarcane, for example. Fair enough, because they do tillage all the time and they pour on the fertilisers, and respiration's really strong. This is an old sugarcane paddock that was bought by a vanilla grower. So it was a cane field. The organic matter in the soil, so I'm talking organic matter, not organic carbon. The organic matter, which you'll cover hopefully later, Rebecca, the organic matter percentage was about 3 to 4%. And does someone want to give me a number rather than very high? Someone want to have a guess what they got it to in 11 years?
Oh.
Yep. Very high. 11. Yeah. 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 Sorry. Yeah, you grow it in it's a perennial crop, so it's a bit like a tree crop.
So you're saying that in 11 years it's been from 50% to 28%?
Correct. Correct. So what do we know has happened? Sorry? No shortage, but that'll still drive respiration. So they've changed from a cane farming system to a permanent bed system. That's a big thing. They've also done some other things. But does everyone see that in that situation, the humus content has increased markedly? So the humification process has been encouraged and the respiration process has been slowed down. They've also added in organic matter. But that organic matter in a sugarcane paddock after harvest, you'll have, has anyone ever seen them harvesting cane or watched a YouTube video? After they don't burn, in most areas they don't burn cane anymore. So after they harvest, there's a trash blanket on the ground. Anyone bought sugarcane from Bunnings? Yep, that's all. You shouldn't be buying that. That's wrecking the reef, right? Leave it on the cane field. So after harvest, you've got a mulch layer about that thick. Where's that mulch? Oh, beautiful mulch. Where do you reckon that is in 3 months, 6 months' time? It's gone. It's gone. It's all broken down.
They haven't built the car.
Yep.
What it's got.
They haven't been able to.
Respiration, correct.
They haven't been able to store it.
It's very challenging for them, yeah. So she's obviously doesn't do that anymore, the vanilla farmers, but they've changed. They don't do tillage anymore or anything like that. So over that time, humus has happened. So now much more of the organic matter's gone that way than up in the air. What would be an example around here to bring it back to local relevant? How could you increase that and reduce that in grazing systems around here? Perennial pastures, yeah, we can all grow perennial pastures, but how have you got to manage them to build that side of it? Yep, getting better water, well, just rest and recovery on the perennial grass, because perennial grasses, what's their, well, I've got some here, so we don't need to use the whiteboard anymore. Okay, I'll just finish up because I'm aware we're getting close to time. Here's perennial grasses, a couple of them. I'll start with this one, just pretend it's a nice perennial grass. So perennial grasses, they've evolved to deal with drought, grazing, and flooding. They have evolved to deal with herbivores and flooding and droughts. What's their strategy to come back, a perennial grass? Because remember, they need rain, everyone needs rain, but how do they bounce back? They build a root system. And what does the root system store for them? Energy, carbohydrates. So after they get grazed or burnt or droughted, because it's going to happen, or flooded, they will pull that energy back up. Is everyone happy with that? So how long can a perennial grass actually survive for? Does anyone know how long they live for?
I mean, as long as they can keep sourcing energy.
Yeah, what's the longest a perennial grass can live? 15 months.
Oh, it'd be long, way, years. Might be thousands of years, I don't know.
So in the New England and New South Wales, where I'd come down from a few years ago to Albury, there's a grazier there at Uralla. Does anyone know Uralla or Walker, sort of southern New England? He's got a perennial pasture that he sowed in 1956 with his father, and it's still going today, hasn't been resown.
What is it?
Mixture, fescue, cocksfoot, different clovers, And how's he managed to keep it going for so long? Good grazing man. Yeah, he was around. He was doing it before that word came into Australia.
How does he know that plant is that old?
Absolutely. No, you're right. So the perennial, they have three strategies. They tiller. And they also do set seed. But the third strategy they have over an annual grass is they have a root reserve to refill the tillers and regrow. So the actual plant is always moving, if you like a banana plantation. It's always moving because each year you've got a new tiller. So you're right. But that particular plant is building a root system so that when it does get grazed or burnt or whatever, it can rebuild the leaf. Because once you take it below its solar panel, how does it photosynthesize? How does it rebuild the solar panel? It has to pull root reserves. Right. Does that make sense to everyone? Yep.
Does that mean that fire is likely to older perennial regeneration of perennial grasses are
I guess probably what I'm trying to get across, I'm maybe not doing it well, is grasses are adapted to any disturbance that takes them below their solar panels. As long as they have enough root energy to come back and you give them enough time. Because if as soon as I do that once, the plant drops some of its roots, so you shrink the root reserve, what does that do to the soil? Dropping all those roots into the soil, what does that do? You're feeding the soil organic matter. Yep. Does everyone see that? You've just done a big pulse, and then while it's actively growing, it's giving in the dribble, the exudation as well. Yeah. If I allow it to recover, the plant can then build a new root system. If I'm doing sheep short, because I reckon merinos need to be starved to get the fine micron in the wool, then that's the way to get your fine micron. It's nothing to do with genetics. So if I keep it sheep short like that, I never get a root system, and the plant can never build solar panels to allocate some of its energy into a root reserve, which it wants to do. It's evolved to do. So it's just about getting the balance right between disturbance and recovery.
So you're pulling the stock off there to allow that root reserve to reshoot.
Yeah.
At what point, in terms of the tillers, do you get a signal from the plant that you're ready to graze again? In other words, the rest
Can I answer that a bit later? Yeah, sorry, because it is there's not a black and white answer for it, but yeah, there's a few. But does everyone? Where I'm trying to, I guess I'll pull it up at this point because what I'd like to do, yes, is that?
One question,
yeah,
because you
yeah,
haven't used native grass examples,
yeah,
and I'm interested because late last year, which we did a presentation at our land,
yeah,
I thought it was still the winter.
Yeah.
And I thought I'm just going to dig up underneath the dormant kangaroo grass
yep,
plant
yep,
to see what its root system looks
yep,
like. Phenomenal.
Yep.
It hasn't dropped its root system.
Yep.
It's dormant.
Yep.
Do you know, is this similar in other
Yep.
grasses? Is this
Yep.
different?
Yep. Look, I've dug up perennial grasses all over Australia for about 20 years. It depends on whether it's actively growing and how much disturbance it gets on that site. So if you constantly keep it too short, too often, yep, then it doesn't have the ability to build a root system. It just can't build a good vigorous root system. The only work I've seen differentiating native from introduced species is a guy called and this would probably be of interest to you, a guy called Dr. Rob Banks has just finished his PhD in soils, and he looked at the influence of subtropical versus native grasses on subsoil structure and function and undergrazing management. And what he found was that the subtropical grasses overcame sodic soils, so they transformed a sodic soil into a non-sodic subsoil just from their root activity. The native grasses didn't do that. They didn't have the same transform. Now, that was only on those specific soil types. But my general experience is that it doesn't matter whether it's native or introduced, if you allow it to build a root system, it does significantly modify the soil. And the last 2 minutes, because I'm wary of time, is that at the end of the day, when you have all of that crazy stuff going on that we've looked at this morning, and sorry I did sort of jump here and there on it and we went off track a little bit, but when you have root systems, organic matter, that whole community, and balanced chemistry, which we didn't really touch on, not because it's not important, just because of a time factor. When you have everything in balance and you have enough energy, who's driving this show? Who drives this whole show here that you've looked at? The plant and photosynthesis activity, roots and diversity.
The others. It's all important.
It is. The other side to it, so one lever is photosynthesis and the other is fertility. I need to have some fertility. Those two things will limit the system. Yeah.
On the other side,
yep,
with competition, like weeds will take over your perennials and stuff. Do they
yep,
draw
yep.
more?
So maybe I'll finish on that note and say for a perennial grass this is, because obviously a lot of you guys are managing perennial pastures, when the perennial pasture is really, the soil is really functioning well, it will be really well aggregated, which we'll cover I guess a bit later. It'll have good structure. The plant is actually building a topsoil for itself. It has co-evolved for 400 million years. It's not going to evolve a situation where it's always growing in poor soil conditions for itself. When we mismanage that perennial pasture, the topsoil function, the structure will all change. And then the perennial pasture is no longer competitive. So something else will be competitive. A thistle will be competitive when it's compacted. You can bet your bottom dollar. So that's what a prairie soil is. The Yanks call a prairie soil. The grass and the root system and the soil are all co-evolved together. So we have this complex co-evolution. In trees, just the last thing to show you is in trees, it's a different pattern. So in a forest soil, the forest soil is not under the influence of big perennial grass roots. Where's its organic matter?
In the roots.
Litter.
Oh.
So you'll find this is a mature adult tree. Where's the root zone in the forest? It's not deep. The feeding system of a 300-year-old eucalypt tree is the litter layer.
The forest is not just trees, it's understory.
It depends on the forest. So I'm talking a forest with closed canopy and very little understory. So I'm talking about no, I'm just giving you an example of a closed story, very little understory forest. If you're in a woodland or an open forest, for sure you've got a mixed pattern where you'll have the perennial grasses and the wood tree. So if you go to a woodland like the Central Victoria, the open space trees and the grasses, and you do something like a litter test or an infiltration test, you'll find an intermediary pattern. Yeah, but in a closed canopy with very low minimum understory, and around the actual canopy zone of an adult tree, you'll often get what I call a forest soil pattern, which is the feeding roots of the trees is all in that litter layer when you care to look at it, rather than a perennial grass, which tends to have its feeding system at a much deeper. Yeah, yeah. So I'll leave it at that point there, but that's how you form that topsoil. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.